This is episode 129 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico podcast. I'm Paul Gessing, president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. I am pleased to be joined this week by special guest Pat Rogers, a local concerned citizen of Albuquerque, who we will be discussing a proposal for the fall ballot. Yes, there is a major election. You don't have to wait till 2020, folks. There's a major election coming right here this fall, 2019. All kinds of folks will be on the ballot. This particular proposal is a ballot initiative in the city of Albuquerque called Democracy Dollars, and it has some fairly significant implications for local elected races in the city of Albuquerque. Yes, there's a lot of other issues on the ballot around the state, around the region, but this one is relatively unique, and we'll be talking in some detail about it. So welcome to the show, Pat.
Thank you, Paul. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and you've been tracking this issue for a while. The folks who put this on the ballot or are trying to put this on the ballot collected signatures to do so. So this is the initiative process. It's been in the works, though, for a few years, though. So talk about that and what caught your eye originally about this Democracy Dollars concept.
Well, it is yet another Olay-inspired effort. And Olay always catches my eye. That's the entity formerly known as Acorn, and it's been operating in Albuquerque and a number of places for a number of years. It's funded by dark money out-of-state entities, and in large part, they have opposed every conservative proposal, and they have supported every tax increase proposal possible. So that began in 2018, and they gathered petitions in June of 2018, and the process began a year ago at the county level. The question did not make it on the 2018 ballot as planned, yet it's somehow been resurrected and is now going to appear on the 2019 November ballot for all city voters.
All right, and Olay is also known as Organizers for the Land of Enchantment, although my understanding is it is the Acorn 2.0 after Acorn dissolved, and the pimp video situation of a few years ago. James O'Keefe exploded onto the scene by getting Acorn offices all over our country to essentially sanction prostitution in a series of videos. That was really when he got his start. But Olay is the version here in New Mexico, and they were knee-deep in the mandatory paid sick leave or mandatory leave policies, and they've been very active and quite frankly somewhat successful here in Albuquerque, at least, in pushing their far-left agenda, whether it's through the ballot box or through candidates that they've supported. So let's talk about the specifics of what Democracy Dollars is all about. Now, I know Seattle, Washington has a Democracy Dollars in place, but this is pretty cutting edge stuff. There's only a couple places in the entire country that have this kind of thing in place. Where else, or has it been tried or discussed?
It's been proposed in Austin, and it's been in one other city, but it's not been enacted anywhere. Seattle is the single place where there's presently Democracy Dollars. The state of Washington voted it down a couple of years after Seattle passed it. But the most important thing here is that while the advocates talk about, well, this is just the Seattle version, it is not. Seattle has a specific cap on the dollars that can be spent, or I would say wasted on this matter. More importantly, Seattle doesn't already have a public financing system in place. We already have a system that's wasting millions of dollars, and this is on top of that. And the other thing about this proposal is that it will increase the present system to from $1 per registered voter for the mayor to $1.75. And so there are a collection of promises, as usual, from Ole that are misleading, if not out and out false, with regard to this proposition.
Well, we'll talk about the mechanics of this and some of the issues with the initiative itself, but kind of give us the 30,000 foot version of what the system would look like under democracy dollars. Now, I want to make sure that people did catch that Albuquerque already has public financing of its municipal elections. Now, that did not stop Mayor Keller from not only taking those dollars from the public financing, but it was pretty well documented that he and his campaign people had more than just an arm's length relationship with the PACs and the other people pushing his candidacy for mayor. Now, this is not directly related to that, aside from it's another means of more public dollars flowing into local campaigns. So your tax money at work.
That's exactly correct. What Democracy Dollars is about from Seattle is that voters, or in this instance, residents, and that's really important. I want to talk about that. But residents will receive a $25 voucher. And then the politicians who are already receiving public financing will then go, and their organizations such as Ole, Progress Now, and in the unions will then go out for them and harvest those $25 vouchers. And they will go to the candidates. And so the public financing by this proposal is going to first, the present system is going to be increased by 75%. And then that is going to be doubled by this Democracy Dollars. And so the money that is already being wasted, for instance, with Keller, it was more than $500,000 in public dollars. Then his not so independent Measure Finance Committee collected more than $600,000. Then in this one they got caught on. They attempted to transform cash into in-kind donations. That was another $40,000. On top of that, there were 4 supposedly additional independent Measure Finance committees that collected more than $200,000 for the purpose of supporting him. So understand now, while this is being advertised as something to get big money out of politics, that's incredibly Orwellian. This is going to triple the public dollars wasted on mayoral candidates. And the total is off the chart of how much this is going to cost.
All right, so we start off separate, if you will, from the Democracy Dollars, although in the same proposal that's going to be on the ballots this November, taking the public financing from $1 to $1.75
per voter.
Per voter.
Per voter.
Per voter. Okay, and that's we're going to get to that. Yes, that per resident or per voter. It's very tricky, very nuanced, but you can tell who's advocating for this kind of thing when they add residents to the pool. So I think most people understand the difference between a resident and a voter, but in practical terms, how does that impact the Democracy Dollars proposal to allow residents to receive these vouchers as opposed to just voters?
Well, for instance, now there's approximately 300,000 or so registered voters, okay? But there are more than 560,000 residents, more than. And the problem here is that it isn't even limited to residents of an adult age. It's not limited to residents who are non-felons. And Albuquerque being a sanctuary city and the definition of residency being extremely loose, we're talking about a whole collection of people that are eligible, that may receive these Democracy Dollars, who are not voters, certainly not taxpayers. And the number of these democracy dollars that are going to be floating out in the city, open for the usual fraud and corruption that's gone on with public financing, is over $14 million.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here. This is a lot of stuff. So my daughters are 9, 7, and 3. You're telling me that if this thing passes as written, that those 3 young children could be receiving democracy dollars, vouchers, presumably in the mail, that they can then make their adult decisions of who has the prettiest colors on TV or whatever, and they can then throw these vouchers behind some candidate, right?
That's how the ballot question stands. I'm hoping in the guessing household there will be some adult supervision of this wasteful effort.
Yes, well, there would certainly be. And then, of course, felons and illegals and, whatever you think of the immigration system, I think that we, as in the rational people supporting or wanting to reform the system, don't think that people who aren't legally in the country should be impacting the elections held in our country, and that this could very easily do that.
Yes, it could, because of, and when you think about the nature of the sanctuary city status, residency is a very fluid concept. For someone who is essentially homeless, everyone has to have a residence. That's what they teach in law school. And I can tell you that the beneficiaries of the sanctuary city designation who are here in the city, who do not have a city, must simply declare that this is where someplace that they'd like to live, even temporarily. So it creates huge problems with regard to where these are going to go and who's going to track them.
Now, the final thing you talk about is the left-wing interest groups, Olay being one, but really because of the way these things are going to be spread out, dispersed all across our city, very loosey-goosey in the way it is currently written, that really it's critical that any candidate essentially team up with some kind of grassroots organization or grass tops organization that can then go and do what you say, harvesting these democracy dollars all over the place. And then they, kind of like the monkeys in the Wizard of Oz, the flying monkeys, they collect all these democracy dollars and then bring them back to their preferred candidate. Is that?
Yes, and the Seattle Times stated it more specifically, and this is not as advertised. This isn't a plan to give that lonely, brave, sainted individual candidate fighting the system or the man a chance. No, sir. This is being used by the organized entities, and understand why that is, like Olay and Progress Now and the unions, because you have to be organized to get out and snatch these $25 vouchers. An individual candidate without an organization already behind them can't do that in any numbers. That's exactly what the history of this is, and that's exactly what's going to happen here.
So those are some very significant problems with this democracy dollars proposal as I see it. You've got any restrictions? Do you have restrictions on how these dollars can be used once they are brought into play? Are there different rules relating to this as opposed to other campaign finance dollars, or is it kind of just a dollar is a dollar?
Not only is a dollar, and I want to talk about the other aspect of that, but these are monies entirely available to the campaigns. And, if you lined up 100 citizens and asked them to list 12 things that Albuquerque needs to do to move forward, the idea that we need to throw more tax dollars at politicians would not be listed in the 1,200 replies. And so what we've got here is simply an answer that is very expensive to a problem that does not exist. And you haven't seen a single estimate of the cost of this. And the reason for that is it is much, much more expensive than advertised. When the petition went out and the Ole had people sign this, there was a specific statement in the petition that all the money was already budgeted, meaning this wasn't going to cost anything. And that is absolutely false. And what the Seattle Times also said was, in addition to the dollars that go directly to candidates, which I believe is going to be between 6 and 8 million total every election year, there is a dollar for dollar cost of administration in Seattle. Now, if you think New Mexico can be more efficient than Seattle and it'll cost us less than $1, I don't think so. So we're looking at an additional $12 to $14 million program, and there isn't money for that.
So $6 to $8 million per candidate is what you expect.
No, total.
Okay.
Yeah, total.
Then,
and I'm estimating how many mayoral candidates. This is going to encourage a lot of people, but for any single, I can go through the math for any single mayoral candidate, but my estimate is counting 3 or 4. And then you've got city council. The city council numbers have been boosted as well. And the runoff number has been increased. If there's a runoff, they're getting double the amount they used to get for a runoff. So it's, and most importantly, this isn't the end of it. They've also changed the provision that allows the city council to increase this, but not decrease it. So this is the quintessential government answer to every program that isn't working. The Albuquerque Journal editorialized after the last campaign, after Keller's campaign, where there was so much fraud and so much misuse of the money, and they said maybe it's time to end it. But just like every government program that doesn't work, what's the answer? Well, throw more money at it, and that's where we're at.
So city council under this provision could increase the generosity of the democracy dollars, increase the amount of money allocated to public financing of campaigns? Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
And that used to be a limitation in the charter, and it's being removed.
All right. Well, now, in a silver lining sort of way, and I know that there are groups of people who are concerned, of course, as is usually the case, the organizers, the left, they always have 3 to 1, 4 to 1, or almost infinity to 1 in terms of the dollars that they bring to bear. That's why they're bringing this up to begin with, because it really empowers groups like, but not limited to, Ole. So who benefits from this? Is it primarily, you think, the grassroots or the grass tops organizations is inherently biased towards the left and bigger government? What aside, realistically speaking, what are the specific problems and beneficiaries?
Well, let me start at the 10,000-foot level. Democracy dollars was actually mentioned by a couple of the present Democrats in the presidential race, Yang and Kirsten.
Gillibrand?
Yes. And both of them were proposing a federal system to do this. And this is purely and almost exclusively for the left and for the liberals or progressives. And the reason is someone who doesn't want to take private financing, who philosophically thinks they shouldn't be using tax dollars to promote political speech, or they don't want their tax dollars used to promote someone else's political speech, they are not eligible for this democracy dollars boost. They can't get them. It's only the people who are already at the public trough and taking lots of money. Keller took more than $500,000 in the last election in public dollars.
Wow. So I said something about silver lining. What I meant to ask you at that point was ranked choice voting was recently denied by city council, and despite the progressive nature of the council itself and kind of their the seeming desire both at the state and Albuquerque city levels to really switch around how voting works. I mean, the Electoral College is one, same-day voting registration. City of Albuquerque has had its own agenda, but ranked choice voting was not adopted. Do you think, how realistic do you think we can educate the voters and get folks concerned about this to vote no, even though we're all going to be outspent many multiples to one.
Let me first talk about being outspent many multiples to one. The reports that have been filed so far, which, by the way, I don't think are accurate and they're certainly not complete, list more than $250,000 by these organizations, these poverty nonprofits, these nonpartisan nonprofit entities such as Olay, Progress Now, and a collection of them. More than $250,000 has been spent. Not $1 has been spent on behalf of the taxpayer to try to educate people about what's wrong with this proposal. And unlike sick leave, Olay learned its lesson. This thing has been, until very recently, sub rosa. I mean, there's been not much public comment at all, because if you look at the details, if the voter looks at this, they're going to vote it down in a hurry. But only if you understand the details. And the form of the question, again, on the ballot, is also misleading. And it includes a statement. They've invented a statement, an advocacy statement, and they've added it. It says, this will not increase the tax rate. Well, that's absolutely misleading at a minimum, and more likely false. It certainly will increase the dollars wasted on this public financing, and tax rates will go up.
Yeah, just that's kind of in my wheelhouse there specifically. Just they say that it's money that's already been budgeted. Well, just spending money that's already been budgeted is no different from spending money that's not been budgeted. It's still money, and you may have a pot of money sitting around, which is not the way government works, but even if you have said pot of money, you spend it, and then the next time around, you have to use precious tax dollars to fund this kind of spending, which is literally taxpayer dollars being used to fund attack ads that will air on your local TV and radio stations, which is not, I think, what average citizens would want to see happen, but if this does pass, it will be exactly what happens under the Democracy Dollars proposal.
Yes, if there were some sort of honesty in these ballot questions, what the question would read something like is, do you really want to see more attack ads and your mailbox filled with very questionable assertions about candidates? None of that stuff is helpful, but there's a collection of people behind this, political consultants, the entities that we've talked about, Olay and so on, Progress Now, and in the whole collection of entities. This will empower them. They will control candidates. There was a public meeting which Olay attended. I think it's August 25th if you start Googling around. But the Olay organizer talked about the advantage of this, that candidates will have to come to us. Candidates will have to listen to us. He's talking about Olay. He's not talking about citizens. There's no question this is about dollars, and a lot of dollars. There's a huge question about whether this has anything to do with improving democracy.
Yeah, it sounds like a funding mechanism for left-wing so-called grassroots organizations like Olay to actually control candidates in a way that they have not really been able to do in the past.
It's public funding on steroids, because it's the total bill is tripling the dollars available to mayor candidates. And imagine, the whole idea that Seattle has this great program, and by the way, just Google Seattle democracy dollars and fraud and find out what goes wrong. But the whole idea, and my thinking is, as soon as Microsoft plants a location here and employs all those highly paid people, when we have a city that's bursting with dollars, then something like this could possibly be considered. But this is just bizarre. This is just bizarre, trying to import a Seattle system, which is limited. It's limited, and providing an unlimited system. This is particularly with the provision allowing city council to increase it. This is like an ATM. This is like a direct line to voters' ATM to fund political speech that they probably don't agree with.
Yeah, you alluded to the fact that Seattle does not have public financing in the same way that Albuquerque does. So this is, of course, democracy dollars, a form of public financing, but we're double dipping in the parlance here in Albuquerque if this is done.
Or double dunking, since it's a trough.
And I think it's also worth noting that despite the alleged fact that New Mexico, just in recent years, I mean, a Republican mayor not too long ago, a state with the Republican governor, there is something about these left-wing interest groups that they really think that we are low-hanging fruit for their plucking. They look at their big map of the country. Maybe the price is right. The media market's cheap. They think the voters are low information voters. You look at Seattle, Austin. They haven't even done this in San Francisco yet. Are you kidding me? I mean, we're now on the cutting edge of progressive.
Berkeley's too conservative for this.
Yeah, it really seems that that Albuquerque in particular has fallen into this this group of cheap dates. Easy for these left-wing groups to go and spend a few dollars.
That's right. And one of the interesting things is that some of the leaders of this effort here locally are the same persons who got into trouble with fraud and misrepresentation in the existing system, the $5 signatures and donations in order to qualify for public financing. The very same people now are urging 3 times that amount be available. And imagine the fraud and corruption when it is established that it occurs, and it occurred regularly in those efforts. Now it's $25. So it is a mistake of biblical proportions, and the money that is going to be wasted is incredible.
Now, of course, we've got plenty of groups on the pro side of this, the usual suspects, but the business community in Albuquerque is not the strongest to begin with, and they would be a logical group of opposition. Rio Grande Foundation will step up and do what we can, but our budget's not huge on the best of days, and we've been fighting a lot of battles as well. Do you see a counter voice to this, or is that you and me, Pat Rogers?
Well, I think your daughters are on our side, aren't they?
They will use their democracy dollars correctly if there is if a conservative decides to jump in the race. I mean, really though, this does seem tailor-made towards left-wing special interest groups. Right. I know that the Rio Grande Foundation doesn't have money for canvassers to go out around collecting these all over the city, and I don't think many conservative-minded people aren't going to be willing to do that.
No, Ole and Progress Now presently have staff. They have bands of people that already are organized to do this, and they're already prepared to harvest those. And candidates who are already receiving public dollars are going to be the immediate beneficiaries. Their consultants are going to get richly paid, and Ole and Progress Now are going to control this thing. Every last conservative, every last business person, every last person I've talked to about this can't believe, what we're about to face, but there's been no large-scale effort to educate people and so on. This one's a little bit different from the sick leave. The sick leave had an immediate impact on very tenuous people. I mean, it had a significant impact on small business. This one is more ephemeral. I mean, but it's much, much more dangerous because if this passes, this will allow control of the progressives for as long as it lasts.
Yeah, and that's a challenge because there have been so many clear and present dangers, whether it's the legislative session this year or the plastic bag ban, which for some businesses was a clear and present danger, paid leave, whether it's sick leave in 2017 in October, and or the recent round in Bernalillo County, or the soon-to-be developed paid leave in the city of Albuquerque again after we had the county go through with theirs. So hopefully we can get some funded opposition to this. There seems to be a legal case. This thing is poorly written. They've tried the log roll. There's all kinds of procedural issues. Set aside the actual democracy dollars itself. The ballot measure and the way it's been handled to date lead you to believe that there's some serious legal questions right here that need to be addressed.
There are. The form that's been placed here is extremely prejudicial to voters. I mean, the language that's been employed without any authority, beginning with this will not increase your tax rate. That's not in the petition.
That's straight out of the bond measure things that, this bond will not increase your taxes. But yes, if you decline to support a bond measure, your taxes will likely go down. But to say that we're going to increase government spending and that is going to have no impact on your taxes, that is a bit of a bridge too far, I would say, right, Pat?
Yes. You've seen that trick before. And this one is just, what do you have, 129 episodes? This is, 1,290th episode of that bait and switch.
Yeah, but that's not by any means the limit to the problems. And I don't know if you want to go through more of them. Let potentially Olay listening to this podcast, but I think the issues are pretty clear when you go through them. First and foremost, this was collected such a long time ago, and they said it was going to be on the ballot a year ago. Well,
on the petition, they told people signing this that this was necessary for three reasons. One, democracy dollars. Two, that the charter needed to be changed because the election dates had changed. The third thing they said was the money's already budgeted. And what they didn't say was, and by the way, we're also raising the amounts to be paid to individual candidates. Let me say one other thing about that, because when you look at these two proposals, there are two proposals that deal at least tangentially with the public dollars that are currently going. The mayor candidates who establish their rights to public financing currently get $1 per registered voter. The two questions that they're proposing each contain this increase. So they're taking two bites at the apple. They're taking two bites.
Two ballot measures.
Ballot measures include this $1.75 increase.
Now, how do we have two ballot measures to create one new program? What are the nuances between those ballot measures, and why can't they do it all in one fell swoop?
Well, one is a lot less controversial. The first one actually does some minor changes that are arguably necessary. It's the democracy dollars one that is just an outrage and completely off the charts. And so they want two bites at the apple. No one has the time or the energy to go after both of these, but both proposals include an increase. So you got to vote no on both of them. But the idea that they would line up two of these and give existing politicians, read mayor, read city councilors on public financing, two shots at essentially doubling their dollars is wrong.
And you mentioned already budgeted. What is the justification for that? Where are they saying this magical money tree is located that's going to pay the bills for this expansion of government?
Well, when the city first adopted the public financing, there was a specific dedication of, I think it's 0.5% or something. Now, when they first adopted it over the objections of a collection of people, me and a few others, pointing out that it was completely unconstitutional, the provision that said, in addition to these dollars, we'll throw some more at you if anyone says anything bad about you. If you're a candidate with public dollars and someone publishes some ads or addresses anything negative about you, we'll give you more money. So it's completely unconstitutional. And nonetheless, the usual people, Common Cause says, oh, no, it's constitutional. Don't worry about this. Just pass it. And, of course, it was struck down and taxpayers paid dollars to address that. So this fund, which was originally designed to address public funds, part one, and then two, this fund in case somebody got attacked. It's grown to $3.1 million. It's been in an obscure an account instead of some kind of tax break or putting this towards public safety. I don't know, something like crime or car thefts or something. Instead of doing that, it's been sitting in this fund. So when they say it's already budgeted, well, that money should have been returned. But $3.1 million isn't going to pay for 1/5 of this. It isn't going to pay for 1/5 of this. And that's a collection of money that's accumulated over 15 years. So we're in trouble. The money is not there.
And of course, 1/5 of it the first year.
Right.
This is going to be a recurring expense. You're not just going to have one campaign with democracy dollars. If this thing passes, it's going to be every single election cycle, every 2 years, whether it's a mayoral election or not. Yeah, mayoral elections will be more expensive, but city councilors are going to want their piece of the pie, and they're going to be demanding a lot of dollars as well. So it's going to get very expensive very quickly, and then they can go and raise it whenever they want to for their campaigns.
That's right.
Well, Pat, I know that this is yet another issue that the Rio Grande Foundation will be doing its level best to raise the public awareness about. This is our top priority for this fall's election, to try to do something to stop this horrendous proposal from happening. And we'll be marshaling our resources, putting some information up at errorsoфenchantment.com. Of course, this podcast hopefully gets spread around our fair city and people start to catch on to what is really happening and what's at stake. Any other last words of wisdom for us on this issue? Anything we missed in this conversation that you want to make sure people are aware of?
I think this is the most dangerous proposal in my adult lifetime. I think that this is something that if it occurs is going to have the most damaging impact upon Albuquerque for a generation here. This will result in a sharp leftward liberal progressive turn that is going to hurt our city, which continues to struggle with real problems, crime, education, homelessness, all that. And for heaven's sakes, instead of always finding a way to put more money in their pockets, can't we look out one time for the taxpayer and return some of this money? If we've got money like that to waste, send it back to the taxpayer.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time, Pat Rogers. And thank you for listening to this week's podcast. Make sure to get the latest edition of Tipping Point, New Mexico by subscribing at Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. You can post or comment on this and other episodes on Facebook and Twitter, and tell Google Home to play Tipping Point, New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.